Hello, welcome to the Washington Circle podcast. I'm Élison Santos. I'm a psychologist and also I'm a writer and a researcher. The main thing that is happening in the world today has to do with the way we deal with our time. So we are paying attention to our cell phones, right? Our smartphones. We are on the internet. And how does it affect the way we process things that happen to us? So, as a psychologist, as a clinical psychologist, I have the opportunity to work with patients in Washington, D.C., where I have a license, and also in Brazil, where I'm from. So, working in these two countries, in North America and in South America, it gives me a perspective, a different perspective of how is human beings dealing with problems that are mostly the same, right? Because even in America, even in the United States or in Brazil, we are all connected to the internet. And we see some things that are happening. So we have new studies showing us what's going on with our adolescents, right? With our kids, with our children, how the internet is affecting education, is affecting relationships, and also how many times I see parents uh, who are spending their times on the internet, and also how it affects the attention that they can give to their kids, to their children. So let's try to think about that, right? So I don't know if you are familiar with the Austrian author, a psychiatrist whose name is Viktor Emil Frankl. Viktor Frankl wrote a book that is known everywhere, and it has become one of the 10 most influential books in the United States. It was considered by the Congress of the United States as one of the 10 most influential books in America. And it has sold millions of copies worldwide. The book is called Man's Search for Meaning. In this book, Viktor Frankl talks about his experience as a prisoner in the concentration camps during the Second World War. So, as a Jew, he was a prisoner. But what makes this book very amazing is that before the war, in the 1930s, even in the 1920s, Viktor Frankl started writing about his theory about also discussing with other authors in Europe, for example, Freud, who had the idea, whose theory was about, well, the main search of the humans in life is for pleasure, or even with Adler in Vienna, whose theory was talking about that the main search of a person, of humans, are for power. So we have these Viennese society of doctors, right? They were all doctors talking about the nature of human beings. So for Freud, we search for pleasure. For Adler, we search for power. Viktor Frankl knew these guys and he was talking to these guys. He was also part of the group that was meeting like weekly or monthly with Alfred Adler. And at some point, he had some questions about Adler's theory. And he asked Adler that, and he said, well, isn't it that more than power, the human being looks for meaning? Isn't it that meaning is more important than pleasure and power? So Viktor Frankl starts writing about this. And then, of course, he, as a doctor, he was working with suicide prevention. He was the head of the suicide department of the psychiatric hospital in Vienna. And then the war comes, he becomes a prisoner. And what he sees during these 3.5 years that he was a prisoner in 4 concentration camps is that these people who are there suffering in unimaginable suffering, right? A situation that none of us can even imagine well, right? We watch movies, we see documentaries, we visit the museums, the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., that is an amazing museum. We can see these stories, but we can't really grasp what they were experiencing. So the subtitle of this book, that after the war, because he survived, he can publish, is A Psychologist in the Concentration Camp. So you have a doctor who has a psychology education there as a prisoner, observing, not just observing. He tells in this book, Man's Search for Meaning, that he has helped people, everybody. So there was a structure among the prisoners that Viktor Frankl started, that every time that the prisoners saw other prisoner who was thinking about committing suicide, they were going to try to bring that person to Viktor Frankl, to Dr. Frankl there. So he was working as a doctor. He was trying to help people not to commit suicide. But what do you tell to a person who is a Jew in the under the Nazi regime in the concentration camp, where you see the smoke from the gas chambers and you see that your brothers and sisters are dying, and you know that you can be the next every day, and you lose your family, you lose your friends, as Viktor Frankl did. He lost everyone. And how do you tell these people, well, don't commit suicide, don't kill yourself? Why? Why am I not going to think about killing myself in this situation? And then Viktor Frankl talks about the meaning of life. It's interesting because even that in that very suffering and deep suffering moment, he himself, he writes in his books, he thought about committing suicide. And then one day he is by himself there looking over the fences, and he promises himself. And he told him, well, no one is going to take my inner freedom. So there is a freedom inside myself. They can put my body, they can put myself here in this prison, but inside myself, in my mind, in my heart, I am free. And I'm not going to go to the fence, right? Because that was the term that they use to commit suicide, right? If you run to the fence, that is an electrified fence, you're going to kill yourself, or even by running in that direction, some soldiers were going to shoot you and kill you. So how can we go back to this book, to these stories, and how can we think about humanity nowadays? So we are not in concentration camps. Although many people are suffering the results or the consequences of wars nowadays. So we have people suffering wars in Ukraine. We have people suffering wars in Gaza and Sudan and other places on earth under violence. But even though we have a lot of kids, we have a lot of adolescents committing suicide in our schools, we have school shootings, we have kids killing other kids, we have violence, we have feminicides, we have people killing women all over the world, and we have domestic violence and crime, and we have political violence. We have a lot of problems happening in our society. And sometimes we get depressed, we get anxious, and we go to the doctor, and all the things that we need, or the doctors or medicine in general thinks we need is medication. And all these things are very important. And sometimes we do need medication, but we need something else. We need more than medication. We need help to find meaning. And even in the 1930s in Vienna, when Viktor Frankl wrote in the columns, he wrote articles in the newspapers of the city talking about the suicides that were happening there. And the closer, when you see these researches, these studies, you see that the closer they got to the Second World War, because of the Nazi regime, the amount of suicides was increasing. So the number of suicide was increasing, especially among young people. And one of the things that Viktor Frankl wrote in the newspaper at that time was this. He was saying, well, maybe it's not because of economical problems that young people are committing suicide or giving themselves to violence, even if the violence was against themselves. But maybe it's because we, as a society, we are not giving enough space. We are not giving enough space to listen to these young people, to give them space for them to talk about what really matters. Well, we are here 70, 80 years, 90 years later, almost 100 years later, after the 20s and 1920s, 1930s, and we still have so many problems in our society worldwide. I'm not just talking about the United States, I'm talking about the whole world. Problems with suicide among young people, problems with depression. So depression is now the main cause of absence in work everywhere. So anxiety. And why is this happening? One of the things that Viktor Frankl also helps us to understand is that if we go to psychiatry documents nowadays, we talk about depression. So this is a disease, right? There's a code for depression, and we know how it happens. There are a lot of types of depression, actually. But Viktor Frankl, he goes deeper. He says, well, maybe it's not just depression. There is a thing called existential vacuum. So it's not just a psychological problem. It's an existential problem. So if your soul, right, not just your brain or your body, if your soul, right, if your noetic dimension, right, the nose, the spirit, that part that is not material, if you don't find meaning in life, if you look around you and all you see is war, all you see is fight, is polarization, is people fighting against each other. So you say, well, why? Why am I here, right? What's the meaning of life? If my search for meaning is frustrated, I can go through this path of illnesses. I can get a disease, but it's not a mental disease, it's not a physical disease, it's an existential crisis, which he called existential vacuum or existential void. There is something here that I don't have, and I can't see, I can't find. In my research as a psychologist working with suicidal patients, every time I ask them, why why did you stop trying, or what prevents you from trying to kill yourself? Almost 100% of the patients will tell me, no, I didn't try again. For those who have had attempts before, I didn't try again because I thought of my mother. Oh, because I thought of my friend. I didn't want my friend to go back to the apartment and find me dead. Or I thought about my dog. So what keeps people alive is not money, is not power, is not pleasure. Although we all need these kinds of things, it's good, right? It's good to have power, to be able to do things. It's good to have pleasure. We love pleasure. It's part of life. But it's not what makes us kill ourselves, or it's not what makes many people think about committing suicide. So what saves us is our connections, is the way we deal with people around us. So it is so important to live in a society where love is the main language, where instead of promoting war and violence and division and polarization, we promote connection, validation, information, better relationship, friendship, respect for one another. So we need to love each other, and we as adults, we have the power. So presidents, political leaders, religious leaders. So we see so many religious leaders that instead of preaching love, they are preaching division against other religions. So even when people nowadays, young people, look to the leaders, to adult leaders, they see division. They don't see happiness. And we all know how we can find happiness. We find happiness with the people around us, people who we love. So why not we promote love instead of war, instead of violence, instead of disrespect? So these are the first things, and maybe the most important things, that I wanted to reflect with you today. I hope that we'll have a lot of other moments in this podcast. Now, today I talked to you about Viktor Frankl's theory. There is a big theory. He wrote a lot of books, and the main theory is called Logotherapy, so the therapy of the meaning of life. So you can go there and read those books, especially Man's Search for Meaning. Go there and read that book. And I hope you can come back to this podcast, and you can be in touch with us on Instagram, for example, at the Washington Circle. This is our Instagram profile, or in the website. And our website is thewashingtoncircle.com. Thank you for listening, and be welcome to send some questions, comments, and participate in the next podcast as well. See you later.